We're talking Cleveland Browns, one of the most fun teams to follow as we head toward 2025 training camp and this season. Quarterback competitions galore. It's not just a two-man competition. Up to 4 members involved in this competition, and the guy that knows all about these Browns and what's happening in the AFC North, Spencer German, joining us on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson, as always, at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks so much, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love and appreciate all of our everydayers out there. Thanks for hanging with us as we get ready for 2025. A really good one today with our guest, Spencer German of Locked On Browns, to break down those Brownies and what's going on with the quarterback competition and a whole lot more as we get ready for 2025. Make sure you are all subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you listen to your podcast, and not only Peacock and Williamson, but Locked On Browns as well. We appreciate you for it. And if you're already subscribed, hit the thumbs up. Let us know you stopped by. Spencer, first of all, the official welcome to the network. We haven't chatted with you since you joined the network, and in your first full off season as host of Locked On Browns, you got yourself a doozy over there. I'm sure you got tons of content every day, even though it can be slow in the offseason. It's going to be one of the more busy off seasons around the NFL, I imagine. So hope you're having fun, and congrats on joining the network.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I actually just got the call from David Locke a couple weeks ago about, or I think like a week ago, about it being my 100th show, and it kind of like snuck up on me. I was like, oh, it's already been 100 shows. Like I didn't even realize I was there. So it was cool to get that call, and it's been a great welcome. Everyone here has been tremendously welcoming and just awesome. So yeah, I'm happy to be part of it and happy to join you guys today.
Yeah, your team is always in the news. It's not a quiet environment. Trust me, I was on staff there 20 some years ago, and we went through 3 head coaches in my 365 days, and a bevy of two GMs, a couple quarterbacks. I mean, there's always moving parts in Berea.
That's 100% right. Some things never change, I guess, in that way.
Yeah.
It's funny because like even as recently as 5 years ago, 2020, Kevin Stefanski gets here. Browns make the playoffs. I think everyone was feeling pretty good about like the direction of the franchise. You had a lot of young, talented pieces. Myles Garrett was early in his career. Denzel Ward was early in his career. You had Baker Mayfield at quarterback. And then we all know what sort of changed that was the fallout of that 2021 season where Baker gets hurt and he doesn't look the same. And the Browns are sort of out there flirting with other quarterbacks. There was the whole Odell Beckham Jr. debacle and how that went down. And that, I think, divided the locker room a little bit. And then they make the big trade for Deshaun Watson. And so it's funny how like little moments as I've been covering this team for that stretch of time, like little moments and little things you can look back on that just change the trajectory of how a team ends up where they are. And so that brings us to 2025, where you're sitting here with Deshaun Watson still on the roster, but probably unlikely to play this year. And 4 other quarterbacks, this very random island of misfit toys like quarterback room where you're just trying to figure out who's going to be the starter, and we're having some fun with it. But yeah, it's like I said, some things never change when it comes to the Browns and the quarterback situation, it seems.
Hey, it could be worse. You could be hosting Locked On Steelers and have no quarterbacks to talk about. You get to talk about 4 guys competing for a job there.
I know the Browns quarterbacks better than I know the Steelers quarterbacks. I recruited Joe to Pitt way back when from Audubon High School. Kenny and I share a birthday tomorrow. I'm usually with him at minicamp, and I've been around Kenny a ton, plus with my Pitt ties. And now, I mean, Steelers don't have anybody.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what's funny about that is like one of the more fun topics of this offseason has been this idea that like, can the Browns actually say for once, like they have a better quarterback room than the Pittsburgh Steelers? And obviously with those teams being rivals, it's like, I think fans really lean into that. And right now I think that's probably true when the Steelers quarterbacks are just Mason Rudolph and Will Howard. I think Browns fans would rather take the guys they have right now, even though what they have isn't great either at this moment. But yeah, it's kind of a fun little debate there, at least until Aaron Rodgers, I guess, decides to do something. We'll see.
It's funny because the guy who might win the Browns job is the one that the Steelers didn't want and kicked him out of town anyway, and Kenny Pickett. So it still might not be the case even with the 4-man competition. I don't know that I would bet money that Kenny Pickett wins the competition, Spencer, but I believe he was the one that took the first reps in the offseason program, right? As QB1. So talk me through that. Who's taking reps where? Because I mean, we can talk about how they look as they perform on the field. And I don't know if you have any charting information on that. Charting training camp was a big thing with the 49ers a few years back. And I've seen some
makes me crazy.
Some OTA stats, which is like even more insane. But I love it, man. And that's the world we live in. But I think you can really learn a lot about where the team expects them to be, or at least where they're starting from. With someone has to take the reps first. So who is that right now?
Yeah, so first, you won't find me charting stats this time of year. I get it a little bit more during training camp. There's a little bit more like different context there. But like right now, and you guys are aware of this, like OTAs, mandatory minicamp, it's a lot of just getting guys acclimated to the system, the scheme, what they're doing. It's less about the results of the plays and more about like, are they translating the playbook to the field? Are they seeing the right things on a given play? And if they throw an interception on it, so be it. Like you live with the results. And I think this time of year, so I'm not out here. And there's also the context of like which team they're going against. Like Shedeur has put up some good numbers from those graphics you guys have probably seen, but a lot of that has come against like 3rd and 4th stringers. So you would expect him to put up good numbers against those units on the Browns. So I'm not necessarily charting it, but you are right that Kenny Pickett has been first up quite a bit during these OTA sessions. And there is a lot of smoke with him when it comes to this organization, just the way that they feel about him. He is the one quarterback, if you think about it, that they traded for this offseason. Like they basically got a quarterback all 3 ways you can get one in the offseason. They traded for one, they signed one, and they drafted 2. So the one that they got first was Kenny Pickett. And it was somebody that they had their eye on enough that they were willing to give up some draft capital for him. I understand it was just a 5th-round pick plus the DTR with DTR getting thrown in. But you're talking about like teams, how much they covet draft capital. They were willing to part with a 5th-round pick to bring him in. And so I think that tells you they felt pretty strongly that like he has a good chance to be the starting quarterback for them this year. Flacco was brought in later. And that's the other thing that's hard to get a read on right now is I think like for example, on Wednesday, Flacco didn't really take a lot of reps. And I'm sure there was people that said like, oh, Flacco's already sort of fading in this competition. I didn't see it that way at all. To me, it was, I think they know at this time of year, what you're trying to accomplish. Flacco's the one who's most familiar with the offense. He played in it 2 years ago. You know what you're getting with Flacco. He's a 17-year veteran. Like you kind of know what he's going to bring to the table. He knows what he's doing. You don't need to like show him different things. He needs less reps now than any of the guys. So I think it was more so just about that right now for him. And I'm curious to see like at mandatory minicamp next week. And then when training camp opens up, like how that pecking order looks between those two, because those are the 2 guys duking it out. And the Browns have spoken so glowingly of Kenny Pickett. It would not surprise me if he's the starter. Now, I push back on that because I think, like with this team especially, young team, a lot of rookies, especially on offense. You got 2 young running backs, a young tight end, a receiver group that's largely unproven outside of Jerry Jeudy. Like they need a quarterback that is going to lift everybody up. And I think that's Flacco if you're trying to accomplish that right now. I'm still not sold on like what you're going to get from Kenny Pickett, but they seem to really like what he brings to the table. And I think in some regards think like he can be their Sam Darnold, that they sort of revive his career.
So do you agree? It sounds like you're on the fence, and I don't want to speak for you, but if I were to put a chip down today on June 5th, who is the starting quarterback week 1, I would put it on Flacco.
If I had to bet right now, I'd probably put my money on Pickett just because of how I know the organization feels about him. That's again, I tried to clarify it as like, that's how I think they're thinking. If it was me, I would start Flacco. So I'd be with you in that, like, I think Flacco should be the one if you're picking between the veterans to start the season. But I think the organization thinks so highly of Pickett rather that he's going to be the one that ultimately starts. What's interesting too, is like this room being made up of 4 guys, someone's going to be the odd man out. They're not keeping 4 quarterbacks when the season.
That's my next question.
Like, yeah, and how that shakes out.
It's really hard to divvy out practice reps and time. And are there 4 roster spots to even be had?
I don't think so. It's not abnormal for them to have 4 quarterbacks this time of year. But when you get to training camp at the end of training camp, they got to find a way to like get rid of one of those. And most of that, like when we've talked about that, I think the consensus seems to be they think one of the veterans will be the odd man out, and because Andrew Berry just doesn't part with his picks in year 1. He rarely parts with draft picks in year 1. So I think it'll be the rookies and one of these veterans. And so that what makes that interesting though is like who Andrew Berry the last 2 years has tried to shop quarterbacks at the very end of training camp and get compensation for him, draft compensation. 2 years ago, he got some with Josh Dobbs. Last year, he tried to do it with Tyler Huntley. Nobody really took the bait. So I'm interested to see like how this shakes out and who they try to shop, because there's some interesting landing spots. Like if somebody really wants a veteran quarterback, for example, like the Saints, their quarterback room is super, super young right now. Do they want Kenny Pickett because he has the history with Kellen Moore, right? Like, so how that market sort of takes care of itself will be interesting to see too. And maybe that leans like this, that maybe that ultimately determines like who they think is the starter as well, as like which one they can or can't get compensation for.
More from Spencer German on the Browns, what they look like heading into training camp, and the process that led to not only one, but two rookie quarterbacks in Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And it's June. That means NBA finals are tipping off. And every night delivers highlight-worthy performances. We're talking major momentum shifts, can't-miss moments, series-changing plays, and game-winning shots, maybe a breakout player. Never a better time to get in on the action than right now. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. We're talking player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And how about $200 extra in bonus bets, right? That adds to the excitement. All you got to do is hit your first $5 bet. And of course, you can still bet on tons of NFL props, rookie props, your favorite team to win the Super Bowl. Weekly lines are already up. Major League Baseball all year long. But man, it is NBA finals time. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. So make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. By the way, you guys can all follow Spencer at Spencito_ on Twitter. And of course, Locked On Browns daily. And, you know, give a follow to me and Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL if you want to. And remember, hit the thumbs up. Let us know you stopped by here at Peacock and Williamson. Okay, I want to talk about process, Spencer, because it feels like the Browns don't know what they're doing when it comes to quarterback. History would tell us that they don't, right? And it's funny because you brought up Baker Mayfield and the famous Browns jersey with all the quarterback names that are taped down, you know, and our entire lives, they can't figure out quarterback. And then they actually get a pretty good one who's doing some good things. And then they're like, yeah, we're going to let him go too. So talk to me about that process with Baker Mayfield and how that went down. Cause I don't quite remember, because I was like, oh, he looks really good. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, they hate him and he's gone. And then I really want to hear the process of drafting two quarterbacks and how Dillon Gabriel ended up being a 3rd round pick that they liked even more than Shedeur Sanders. And once you planted your flag with a quarterback, why did they take the other guy? Because the headlines, and I don't know if I've ever seen a guy that's number 4 on the depth chart
Right.
getting more headlines than everybody else, including a rookie that was drafted in front of him, a veteran that has won a Super Bowl, right? It's kind of bonkers what's going on right there from a zoomed out view.
It is a rare thing. I don't know that that's ever happened before. To take you back to the Baker thing to start this conversation, though. Yes, like Baker, you know, he showed so much promise his rookie year. That was a disaster season under Hugh Jackson, obviously, and it led to Hugh Jackson eventually getting fired anyway. And then they started fresh. You had the Freddie Kitchens experience, which went terribly. And then, you know, it kind of paved way for Kevin Stefanski to come in 2020 at a place where you felt really good about the team. And like, if they just got the right leadership, they'd be on the right track. And that bared itself out in 2020. And then obviously 2021, what really started the downfall for Baker was he got hurt. I forget which game of the season it was. It was really early. It went like week 2. He hurts his non-throwing shoulder, breaks his rotator cuff essentially. And that like impacted his play the rest of the season. And there was this back and forth. There was a lot of different reporting done on like Baker really wants to play. And so he's adamant, like, hey, it's not my throwing shoulder, like I'm going to be out there because that's his mentality. Like he's the tough guy, wants to play through it. And the team kind of let him control that rather than shutting him down. And I think it ultimately just hurt him in the long run because he played terribly for that season. And everyone was like, well, do we still think this guy's on the right path to being the franchise quarterback? I also think too, and this is the part that I think outsiders don't know, there was a lot of different feelings on Baker in the locker room. Like it's pretty well reported that him and Myles Garrett didn't really get along. And I think that dates back to the helmet incident with the Steelers on that Thursday night game. Baker, like the interview on TV immediately after, basically like didn't take a shot, but like threw him under the bus. He was like, you got to be better than that in this situation. And as you guys know, like that's stuff that players want to keep in house. They don't want that stuff publicized like that. And I think that kind of started it. And then there were some other things that happened. The Odell situation was a very divisive topic with that team, like how that all went down. They took sides. There was a lot of people who were on Odell's side over Baker's side. And so that I think tarnished some things. So I've never blamed the Browns for exploring their options after that season and being like, you know what, we need to upgrade this position. Because I think we all still had questions about like, okay, after the season he just had, is Baker really the guy? And they didn't want to pay him what it takes to pay those top quarterbacks these days, or even back then. So I understood the thought process of like, let's try to upgrade with a guy that was at one point top 5. Now there's no denying that Deshaun Watson trade is the worst trade in NFL history. And you can debate if they vetted it enough. You can debate if they should have pulled the trigger on it. But I understood the thought process of like trying to upgrade that position. But that's how the Baker situation all went down. And so to set the stage for now, where we're at right now in 2025, what I think is fascinating about this is we've never seen this regime have to evaluate and like draft young quarterbacks before. And I think they already told you they didn't love this class enough to take somebody early enough. Like they sort of set the stage for like, we actually might get our guy next year anyway. But this is the first time that we're seeing them draft quarterbacks and try to develop them. And we're all, I think, glued to our seats to see how that shakes out, because everybody in that media room was stunned when they took Dillon Gabriel at 94. Now, there's been different opinions since the draft on like, hey, there were other teams that had him in that range and thought he could bring some different things to the table. From my understanding, from the Browns' perspective, they really fell in love with his intangibles, the leadership, the poise, the fact that he was just like this model of consistency in college he put up big numbers, as we know. He was always generally pretty healthy, and he has a very strong arm. And can zip it a little bit around the field. Like they liked all those things about him, and that was enough to entice them to draft him at 94. I think we were all surprised by that. And then we were even more surprised when they decided then to take Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round, because it was like, one of the consensus takes has been, if they had flipped those picks, if Shedeur was the 3rd round pick and Gabriel was the 5th round pick, everyone would, I think, resoundingly loved this draft. Because people were on board with like, hey, if you take 2 quarterbacks, it's more bites at the apple, whatever, who cares? But it's just the way that it played out where, and to your point, like Shedeur's getting more talk than the guy that you took in the 3rd round. And so they've kind of done Dillon Gabriel a disservice here to an extent, but they really like Dillon Gabriel. And I think that's played out as well during the OTAs, where he's gotten more reps with the 11-on-11 drills and things like that than Shedeur has. And so they're going to give him, I think, a legitimate chance to see what he can do, especially when training camp opens up.
Spencer, I didn't resoundingly love the draft. I'm one of the few, but I got to break some news. Aaron Rodgers just signed with the Steelers 1 second ago. Just my boys said it's a done deal. Right. So there's that.
Well, there goes that topic about the Browns having a better quarterback.
It's finally done. I've only been asked about it 8,000 times. Right. Back to the Brownies. BP, we can react to that tomorrow, and I don't know that it changes anything. We've seen this coming a mile away. What I didn't like about the Browns draft, and I'm curious your thoughts, isn't trading away from Hunter, because I think he's the best player in the draft. I think he can be a transcendent player, but I didn't think they had the infrastructure to really get the most out of him now. I didn't love Mason Graham, but I understood it. I thought that was a nice, safe pick, really good scheme fit. My huge complaint is 0 offensive linemen drafted. I don't understand that at all. I mean, to me, it was not a great O-line draft, but you have all these picks, and you have 2 potentially really early first-round picks next year that you're certainly going to consider quarterback near the top of the draft if it goes that way. I can't draft 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, a complementary tight end, even an off-the-ball linebacker, despite all those being needs, and not draft any offensive linemen with 4 of them set to hit free agency at the end of the year. Because when the Browns have been good is when Bitonio and these guys were in their prime, and it was based off a good offensive line,
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. And that was another thing that I think left us perplexed at the end of the draft, was that they didn't address that more. We thought that was going to be a higher priority. We thought that could be, depending on what they did with the number 2 pick going into the draft, I think many of us believed it was going to be Travis Hunter. And we all kind of thought, okay, they could come back the next day, start round 2 by taking an offensive lineman as well. So, and that was kind of a sweet spot. There was a number of guys that could have potentially fallen there that would have made some sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, like I'm with you on that. Even at 94, where they took Gabriel, there were still some tackles. Like I think Cameron Williams of Texas was still there on the board at the time. Like there was a couple guys that I thought like, okay, maybe this is where they go tackle, and they didn't. I think again, it's a very, very valid point. And if you're looking at things they didn't address in the draft, offensive line, wide receiver was another one that they neglected to go.
I would even lump edge rusher in there in a really good edge rusher draft. Like a lot of people say, boy, Carter and Garrett would be awesome together. Well, a second round edge rusher wouldn't have been bad with Garrett either, Yeah, and I know you can't have everything.
For sure. Yeah, like the edge was less egregious because you have Miles, and I think they feel good about the development of like Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire. I'm not saying those guys are going to be great, but I think they feel like those 2 guys, especially in Jim Schwartz's system where it's a lot of rotation guys, like they feel like they can be sufficient enough, especially after they took Mason Graham. And so, yeah, like the offensive line is still a big question. Here's the thing. Like one of the big stories from OTAs right now is that DeJuan Jones looks slimmer. He looks more athletic. He's healthy for the first time in a while. And they're moving him over to the left side to see if he can play that spot. He played 3 games there last year and did a decent job. You didn't really hear his name called very much. But he's going to have to learn that position because he's a right tackle by trade. But their hope is like with him looking like he's looked so far, that if he can sort of embrace that, if he can make that transition, maybe they sort of stumble into having their left tackle of the future. And if not,
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, and if Jack Conklin's done at the end of the season, because he's in the last year of his deal after they sort of reworked it during the offseason, if DeJuan doesn't work out at left tackle, maybe he then goes back to the right side and he's your right tackle of the future, and you at least got something short up there. But yes, the offensive line is still something that I think is lacking on this team right now, just the depth of it, and it's something that there's not a lot of optimism for the future right now because they haven't necessarily invested enough picks in it to this point.
More with Spencer German, the outlook of the 2025 Cleveland Browns in the AFC North next. And I'm doing the thing that everyone's doing and talking a lot about Shedeur Sanders here. Just since he's, been in the building, seeing him in interviews, seeing him out on the field with teammates. What is the early return on Shedeur, and just physically seeing him throw the football? Does he look like a guy who's like, oh, this should have been a first round guy?
I think he definitely looks like he can be an NFL quarterback. I early on in the process, I really loved Shedeur to the point where I was like, listen, if he's there too, and you think he's he's one of the best quarterbacks, you take him because you don't want to miss on your quarterback. But as the process played out, as I watched more tape, as I listened to more of the experts, the people who have been scouts, like Matt, like you were, like I value those opinions. And so I came around to the idea that like he probably wasn't worth a first round pick, but it was surprising that he fell to the 5th. The consensus seems to be after the draft that he probably should have gone somewhere on day 2. Mm-hmm. But I think those stories from the Giants and how some of those meetings went scared some people off. And I think there was a mix of like teams like New York probably were like, we're going to prove a point here and we're not going to take them. And I think other teams were like, well, I don't know that I like the sound of like how these meetings went. And so I think it hurt him in the long run. So do I think he was a 5th round pick? No, but I do think he was probably worth going earlier in the draft. I think he has shown why there was reasons to like him during the draft process. I still attest that, and this was my point back then, like the thing he does well, like his decision making, his ability to read defenses. He's good at reading, obviously, like what defenses are showing you and going through his progressions. Those are the things that I think will make him successful in Kevin Stefanski's offense, which is why I loved him for this scheme. Like scheme fit wise, he's perfect. And so that's why I think he has a chance to be successful. Right now, though, he's got an uphill climb because I think the Browns have signaled already that he is the 4th guy in this depth chart. All the other guys are getting more of the reps to this point with 11 on 11 stuff and the ones and those different things. So he's got his work cut out for him. I don't know that. I think it'd probably be pretty lofty to say he's going to be the week 1 starter. But I'm curious to see just how he grows and develops leading up to the season. And I do think he plays at some point because, frankly, the Browns owe it to themselves to play both these rookies before they decide, are we going to take a quarterback next year, to sort of get a sense of like what we have in either of them and kind of go from there. But I think Shedeur's handling everything the right way. since the draft, since he fell, he's been very like humble about like, listen, I'm not worried about that now. Like, I'm just worried about trying to come in and earn my spot, earn my role. He sort of stays above the fray with all the attention that he gets. I think he's been very mature about the way he's handled everything. And that's, I think, the best part of this is it's not like people thought this was going to be a circus. And I don't really think it's been a circus outside of the fact that like people outside the organization make it a circus because he's just this polarizing player.
Well said. And I want to get your quick thoughts on on the pass catchers overall. Like, I was not impressed with Jeudy as a Bronco, but I think he really took his game to a new level last year. Good for him. And there's a lot of ability there. I have been a Tillman fan every step of the way. I'm super excited about him. I don't know what to think about Deontay anymore. I've been around him a lot, and the Steelers just wanted him out of the building. I think other teams have looked at it the same way. But we know he can move the chains, and he's a good football player when out there. I'm a Njoku fan. Fannon's now in the mix. How do you think the pecking order works out with the pass catchers?
Yeah, so starting with Jeudy real quick, because I don't think there's a ton to say about him because I think you kind of covered it. Like, I think he proved last year he can be a wide receiver one. I think this year coming in already, he looks like he has like this different comfortability about him. Like last year it was, I'm getting acclimated, I'm getting adjusted. I haven't been here before, sort of figuring out where he fits into everything. This year he feels like he's just taking it already up a notch where it's like, hey, I'm good. And I like hitting the ground running, doing a lot of good things. He's made some really good plays already. So there's a lot to be excited about with Jerry. Tillman is interesting because the Browns have a lot of high expectations for him. They think he's ready to take that next leap. So much so that's why they probably didn't invest in wide receiver much this offseason. And so he will be the guy opposite of Jerry Jeudy, your other outside receiver. And I think they want to see what he can do. It's another reason why I think starting Flacco makes a lot of sense if you're going to start a veteran at the beginning of the year, because I think Flacco is going to make him a better player and like pull the best out of him. The slot spot theoretically is going to be Deontay Johnson, but along the lines of him sort of being a head case.
He didn't do a ton of that in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, no, and that's
despite his size.
Yeah,
he's really good on the outside. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see how they manage that, how they utilize him, if he even makes this roster, and that's the big question I have right now because he hasn't been at OTAs. And listen, I get it; it's voluntary, but for a guy who is kind of on his last legs in the NFL, like trying to find an opportunity and stick and save his career. I've just been kind of surprised that he hasn't shown up yet. So that slot spot's a big question mark. But because they drafted Harold Fannin Jr., I wonder, and I'm curious to see how much they utilize him kind of as that slot pass catcher, especially understanding Stefanski loves running 12 personnel. There
has to be a lot of 12,
right?
And even some 13.
They got away from that the last couple of years because they were trying to cater the offense to Deshaun Watson. But everybody's been saying, Joel Bitonio just said this the other day, like they're going back to what they did in 2020, 2021, which is, run the football outside zone with some power stuff in there. They're an offensive line that's built for that. And because
Judkins is going to get the ball a lot.
Yeah, Judkins is going to get the ball a ton, and they're probably going to use a lot of two tight ends. And right now, Harold Fannin isn't going to be like your refined blocker. That's going to be more Njoku. So I think Fannin will get the opportunities to go out and catch a lot of passes, especially if that slot spot at wide receiver isn't figured out. So I'm intrigued by it, but there are still a lot of questions, obviously, to be answered. And it's not this group that you look at and feel like there's a lot of confidence there. They have a lot to prove, for sure.
I will tell you on Deontay, work ethic is not a problem. Like, they had to drag him off the practice field. He's kind of obsessed with it. Unless times have changed since his many spots, but he is a very hard worker. Yeah.
Well, and like I said, I try to give guys the benefit of the doubt because OTAs are voluntary. You never know what's going on with somebody. But it kind of caught my attention. Like 1 week he wasn't there. I was like, okay. 2 weeks he wasn't there. I was like, okay, what's going on here? So I'm curious to see like once he gets in the building, and he has been around. There's been some videos on social media shared of like he's like been in the background or like been seen. So I know he's been around, but he just hasn't been there at OTAs. So once they get their hands on him, like at mandatory minicamp, I'm curious to see what that looks like, how they utilize him, what he's kind of bringing to the table, and if he can change some of these narratives about him in terms of like where he's at in his career right now.
Mentioned Judkins and the carries he might get for selfishly for my fantasy football drafts coming up. Is Judkins a league winner? Is he going to be the guy? There's Jerome Ford. They drafted another rookie running back in Dillon Sampson, which is kind of the reason why I was telling teams to wait on running backs, because it was such a deep class and you get some really good ones. As much as I did like Quinshon Judkins, maybe that could have been a spot where you draft a big time offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. By the way, I'm a huge fan of Isaiah McGuire, so I'm excited about what he might look like there if he gets more snaps this year across from Myles Garrett. But Running backs. Is this a committee? Is there should I draft one of these rookie running backs? How do you see this playing out for the Browns?
I think if you're going to draft one in fantasy, you go with Quinshon because he is going to be a workhorse back. They're going to use him a ton. But in the vein of Joe Bitonio's comments about going back to what they did in 2020, 2021, you'll remember that offense was built around Nick Chubb was your first guy up, but he was spelled a lot by Kareem Hunt. And how they had this nice dynamic duo in the backfield that could sort of do different things, give you a nice 1-2 punch. Kareem Hunt was considered the better pass catcher, so utilizing him out of the backfield in that way. And I think that's the same thing they're sort of trying to establish with Judkins and Sampson. They give you a change of pace. Judkins is going to be your power guy. Sampson's going to be your more like pass-catching guy, which he didn't do a ton of that in college, but I think they felt like his skill set offers the ability to do that, and they're going to try to tap into it for sure. I can tell you, and it's not just – I'm going to sound biased because I am an Ohio State fan, but it's not just because of that. I loved Quinshon Judkins coming out. Like, he was probably my favorite running back in this class, and part of it was – because I had visions of Kareem Hunt. He seeks out the physicality. He's like that power runner. And him and Travion was like so perfect together in that backfield because, again, their skill sets were a little bit different. But I just loved what he brought to the table, the fact that he like wants to be physical, runs guys over, he still has the speed to go along with it. So when they drafted him, I was pretty excited for the Browns because I get to watch him now every Sunday. And I think I've said this on the podcast, of all the rookies they took, and I think there's going to be a lot of that have to make an impact in year one. Mason Graham, I think, is going to be a force, especially playing alongside Myles Garrett. He's going to free him up, and Myles is going to free Mason up a lot. But I think Quinshon's going to be like the most impactful rookie in this class for them, just because of the nature of like the position he plays. The Browns are getting back to the basics of what Kevin Stefanski's offense wants to do, which includes a lot of running the football. And frankly, their offense was so bad last year, they just need players who can move the sticks, keep drives alive, score a lot of touchdowns, and those are all things I think Quinshon Judkins is gonna have a chance to do.
Spencer, what last thing I have for you is maybe Schlesinger is the most impactful rookie, and I hated the JOK news. It's so fun to watch. I don't like where that's at all. Really bright future, I thought. And do they think Schlesinger is a plug and play 3-down green dot guy? Is that the plan?
I think they think he can get there. Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny. Carson at rookie minicamp made a comment, like he was asked who he sort of models his game after. And I think in the past he's talked about Luke Kuechly, but now that he was in the Browns building, he kind of said like, yeah, I do think that I feel like JOK is that same sort of style I want to play. And I pause on trying to set that I always hate when we do these player comps because you get a guy coming out of college and you're like, oh, he's going to be this guy. And then you set the bar at that, and then fan bases are disappointed or whatever if they don't reach that. It's like, well, yeah, of course, if you say that Shedeur Sanders is going to be Tom Brady, which I've seen people throw out there, then yeah, they're going to probably be disappointed because Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time. So I think that's unfair. I don't want to say he's going to be JOK because JOK was on a trajectory towards being a great linebacker, and he could have ended up being an all-pro. That was kind of the next step they were talking about with him. So I don't want to set that bar for him just yet, but there are tendencies in his game of JOK. He's rangy.
Yeah.
I think we've seen some of that at OTAs. I want to see him get the pads on, obviously, before I really judge, but some of that ranginess he brings to the table, he looks like he's really instinctual. He can diagnose things pretty quickly. And so I'm excited to see him play too. And I do think he sort of fills that void, especially in super early on in his career, that's left by JOK not being able to play this season.
We're out of time here, Spencer, but last one really quick. And
Sure.
This is sort of where I've been most disappointed in the Browns recently, is the defensive side of the ball. Is Jim Schwartz's unit going to get back to be the thing that just really drives this whole thing and allows the offense to develop whatever they need to do and figure out what they need to do to score points and win some of those close games? Because I feel like they kind of got away from that last year.
Yes. And what's funny is, you bring up last year. I didn't expect the defense to be as dominant as they were in 2023. Like, they were so good in 2023. It was like same thing I kind of said about like comparing players to other players. Like, I didn't expect them to be that good again. Like, these defenses are very fluid. I always say they're like bullpens. Like, one year you could have a great bullpen, and the next year they could be not as good.
And Spencer, as you know, that year they had the weirdest home road splits of all time. Like, they were amazing at home and just okay on the road.
For sure. And that was a factor too, right? And Schwartz talked about that a lot last year. I go back and watch last season though, and I tell you, man, like, they were 3-14, and people are going to use that against them and say like they sucked. I watched every single one of those games. I was at most of them. Like, the defense was not usually the problem.
No.
The defense for most of those games kept them in those games, kept it one possession games, like going into the second half sometimes, because they were still a really good defense. And despite getting short fields and all these different things, the offense was the problem. And Joel, I'm going back to Joe Bitonio again. He talked about this the other day because he said, I think what made our defense so good in 2023 was they were out on the field for like 50 to 60, maybe 70 plays. Last year, they were on the field for like 70, 80 to 90 plays. And that's the biggest difference. Like, that offense could not score. They could not sustain drives. They were historically bad under Deshaun Watson, and then they got a little bit better with Jameis Winston, but it was still very, very bad. And they were turning the ball over a lot with Jameis Winston. So I've already said, like, I think the Vegas odds on the Browns win total is like 5.5. And I know they have a very tough schedule based off of last year's results, and obviously they play in a tough division. But I've reserved myself to the idea that, like, I think they could get to 6 wins just like accidentally if the offense is just competent. If they just get competent quarterback play this year, that defense is good enough that they're going to keep you in games. They're going to give you opportunities to win, and they just need the offense to be good like sometimes to get to 6 wins. So, I think the defense is poised for what people would consider a bounce back effort, but I really don't think they were super far off last year. I think it was just they were made to look worse because the offense was so historically bad around them.
That is Spencer German. You can find him at Spencito on Twitter, and of course, daily Locked On Browns. Once again, welcome to the network, Spencer. It was a pleasure chatting with you. Clearly, you know your stuff and are the source on the Cleveland Browns. And thanks everybody for listening. Make sure you are subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And Matt and I back tomorrow. Aaron Rodgers is a steal.
How about that? Lock it up.
Right
My
here.
phone's just exploding for the last half hour.
Let's go. It's going to be fun in the AFC North. We'll talk about it tomorrow on Peacock and Williamson.